I'm Rob, and I'm an alcoholic. And when I speak in meetings, sometimes I will start by saying, if you're new to the program and you're afraid you might be an alcoholic, or maybe you're sure you are an alcoholic, but you're afraid you might not be able to find an answer, or maybe you're afraid you will find an answer and you can't do it or won't do it. I just want to say that I have shared all of those fears, and if your experience is like mine, I couldn't do it, but we could. And maybe if you're in recovery, you have some fears about COVID right now, because I certainly do. Disruption to the routines that have become part of my program in recovery, what the impact will be on me long term. I have a huge respect for the disease that I have, and I know its power, and so I'm vulnerable to those fears as well. But I think the answer is the same. If I was responsible for making sure recovery worked in the midst of a global pandemic, I'm pretty sure I couldn't do it, but we can. And I take comfort in the fact that there is a vast fellowship, a vast community of people who together have found a way, and in that together have found access to a power that can deal with recovery in global pandemics and any other circumstance that comes to me in my life. The trick for me is remembering the we rather than the I. And that's part of the irony of this whole social isolation right now is that the very thing that is healthy and required for us to work together was the very problem that I had in my disease, and that was self-isolation. Because at one point, in fact, as early as I can remember, I was pretty sure that isolation was the way to go, that the world was a dangerous place, and that I was dangerous to people close to me. And there are experiences I can think of that might have contributed to that. I grew up in a family where I was loved and taken care of, and I had what I needed, a roof over my head and clothes on my back. But my family was not always able to keep me safe too. I think we all come to traumas in our life, and I don't know whether trauma caused this need to isolate. And when I think back now to my childhood, I think of myself as bubble boy, kind of in this hermetically sealed space and terrified to cross that boundary and to truly be present in the world, because it was a dangerous place, and that I was dangerous to people close to me. And there were some experiences I can point to in that too. One of them was a profound one. I nearly killed my younger brother after a fight. We had been arguing. It wasn't a fist fight, but we'd been arguing, and he had been lying to me, and I knew it, he knew it, and he wasn't going to admit it. We argued for a long time. We both of us stubborn. We finally gave it up. It was about an hour later. I was chopping wood, and just an accident with a wedge that had a flake on it that shot off and actually severed his jugular vein, and there was just him and me and my grandmother at the cottage. The blood shot out about 3 feet. Stopped the bleeding, got him in the car, drove to a medical center. He very nearly died on the way to the hospital. He actually, his left arm was paralyzed, and it was a long recovery for him after that. But I still remember going into the hospital room after, and he had lived, and that was a miracle actually, once the doctors figured out what had actually happened. But his comment to me was, I guess God got me for lying. So he felt that this accident was punishment for the fact that he wasn't willing to admit that he was lying. And so I immediately felt not only had I almost killed my brother, but probably destroyed his sense of his self and maybe his faith. Anyway, so I don't know what exactly led to these core beliefs, but they were strong. And I lived on the outside, and I projected an outside onto the bubble that would pretty much help you not see me very closely and get what I needed, or at least stay below the radar. The problem with that is that that's a terribly isolating and kind of constricted place to live, and it's lonely, and it's also you're in that prison with your own fears and eventually shame, and so my experience of my first drink, was release. It was freedom from that bubble. And we were on holidays in Germany. We'd stayed with a family. I was pretty, part of my bubble was be a good boy, and so drinking was not something I was involved in. I was 14 at the time, but we had stayed at this family hotel. It was just their family and our family, and they invited us for dinner when we were leaving, and then it was time to the end of the dinner, and they made a toast, and so I was kind of honor bound to do that. Felt like I needed to out of courtesy, and the plane was leaving the next day, and anyway, my family continued the toast for several rounds, so I don't know how many schnapps with beer chasers we had, but as this was happening, this sense of freedom, and so I ran, and people had gone downstairs. I ran. Luckily, they must have heard me trying to get out the door. Negotiating the corner didn't work very well. But my brother and Petros, who's the family's son, got me. I got away several times until my brother hit me across the face, and took me to bed. Woke up the next morning terribly sick. Made the plane, and then already on the way home so I'd been hit by my brother. Almost missed a plane the way home. Was feeling terribly sick, and of course the best idea would be, those little bottles on a flight. They're just the very next thing you want to do to repeat the whole experience. So that kind of set up. But it was that sense of release from the prison that, and the problem is it's a false release. It becomes another prison in which shame and isolation become intensified, because judgment is not very good when you're in your own addiction. But this theme of isolation and that deepening sense of dread and fear and loneliness, and finally hitting a place of desperation where it was no longer tenable. And I work in the church. I'm a United Church minister today, and was at the time. And luckily, someone in the congregation had come to me weeks earlier to do their fifth step. I had been to their 1-year medallion and almost got up at the 24-hour chip call, but there were other people from the church there, so didn't have the courage at that point. But I knew where to reach out to, and that was the big moment. This choice to reach out beyond the bubble and to come into the world, come into relationship, to risk that fear and vulnerability in order to find help. And in discovering the things that the disease had taken from me, because isolation, you can't be a very good spouse when you're when you're hiding or lying. You can't be a very good father when you're not being yourself with your children, let alone the risks of driving while intoxicated and so on. That freedom I experienced with the same drink, with the first drink, is a parallel to the freedom I began to feel with my very first meeting. And the person I did my fifth with, their fifth with me, I called them, I asked for help. They said, we got to go to a meeting. We went to a meeting in Mississauga, and I had tried everything before. I had tried a psychiatrist for 5 years. I tried ADAPT. I tried antabuse. My doctor prescribed. None of it worked. But when I became ready to reach beyond that isolation and take the hand of help in this program, at that first meeting, I don't know what happened. I do remember thinking, there's more faith going on in the basement than often than on Sunday morning in the sanctuary. It wasn't my church, but anyway, from that meeting, I did not have to drink that day, and a day at a time. I have not had to drink since that meeting. That simple act of reaching out, and that didn't come with the consequences of having to take another drink the next day and find myself doing things and with people that were not healthy to me. What a great gift! Like, I cannot think of another intervention that is available to people that is like the program of the 12-step program and fellowship. Daily meetings for 90 days that are available. People you can talk to 24 hours a day on the phone. Services that you can access. Materials, reading materials that people will give you if you need them, or if you can afford to buy them. And I'm just not aware of anything in the health sector or even in the church that can provide that kind of comprehensive community support. So that a day at a time, and it's been 18 years, and it's a great way to live. And when I went into the program, I thought I already had a relationship with God. It was just the drinking I didn't want God to get into. So I'll deal with that, God. You deal with the rest of my life. Of course, once I came into the program, I realized that underneath the drinking, there's a whole list of other things that I had not been looking at very well. And the good news is, sometimes it seems early in the program, in the first 5 years or so, there's more, and there's always more, and there's more. The good news to that is that it just keeps getting better because there's more. There's always more to look at. We're never perfect people, but we can always go deeper and find more joy. So now this COVID thing happens, and I see so many parallels. The fear and isolation becomes the actual solution when isolation was my problem in my disease. So that was really terrifying to me because, left on my own devices, I'm going to isolate. I need a we to remind me that I need a we to really live, and that life is a we. Life isn't an I, and it's worth the risk. But the more that we've gone, so I had to do several things right away. My routine was interrupted. My morning prayer routine, it takes a lot of discipline to keep me sane. So I do a lot of stuff. Meetings, 3 meetings a week. My sponsees. I have a sponsor that I see weekly, and I have to do those things, and I do them because it gives me a way of life that's joyful and healthy. That I couldn't have imagined, actually, when I was not in the program. So now, but that morning routine was interrupted. I commute to work, the gym is there, there's a chapel at the church, so my morning routine, prayer and exercise, the holistic thing, all happens before I start work. That's gone. And I'm not great at building routines. But I had to do that. and I'm still working on that. But I realized I had to do that. So I started to recover some practices that I had done before that were really helpful to give a spiritual structure to my day. And one of those was a little book by Macrina Widecker called 7 Sacred Pauses. So it's actually based on a Christian prayer tradition of 8 times through the day where you're in prayer. But she's rewritten it in kind of contemporary metaphors and so on. You don't have to be Christian to use this, use poetry and so on. But it looks at the spiritual character of each day. Like each day is a cycle that has a spiritual character. At dawn, it's a moment of praise. At the mid-morning, as you're beginning to work, it's a time of blessing because our work is our love made visible in the world. At noon, it's a time of contrast, the light and the shadow. As we move into the afternoon, increasing subjectivity, and as we come to the end of the day, we're reflecting on what has been the gift of this day. And so it could be just a pause to smell a coffee at midday to remember the spiritual character of the day that can re-ground me. And maybe even to go to the book and read one of those poems or read one of the reflections that's there. But it doesn't have to be a lot, but those pieces help me bring a structure to my day that reminds me of the disciplines that I have to do. So I didn't have the gym. I bought an elliptical, and there was a wonderful moment of joy when the poor delivery guy was bringing the thing in, and he said, "You wouldn't believe how much exercise I'm getting delivering exercise equipment to people who are now." So I'm not alone. There's a lot of people that depend on that, and I've got to get because I live so much in here. Part of my spiritual discipline is to keep my body active and healthy, and it's how I work out stress. And so 30 minutes on the elliptical in the morning, and that leads into my prayer time, and that's critical. Starting the day right is just so important for me. And if I don't, I realize it, and that's good, because my day will suck, and I've got a better chance of doing it the next morning. I realize that habits are good to stack on habits, but habits will form if you keep failing and keep trying again. So structure to the day, really important, disciplines of the day. The meetings, I value face-to-face. I love the sense of fellowship, but if it has to be on Zoom, then I have to do it. And I'm discovering that what I think is vital to my recovery is just the method of pointing me to what's essential in my recovery. And the method is not the solution. So the way that it happens doesn't matter. What's required of me is the openness to the connection. Honesty, openness, and willingness. And if I'm willing to go to a meeting even though it's Zoom and I don't like that, even though I have to learn some technology, even though there's going to be some disruptions or maybe even a Zoom bombing of some kind, that's not the point. Those interruptions are not going to distort or take away my sobriety, my program. What's going to take away my sobriety in my program is the closing of my heart to the connection that happens. And that connection can happen on a Zoom meeting. It can happen on my own, totally alone. Because what I've discovered in this time of isolation is that I'm never alone. I'm only alone when I close myself off from connection. My higher power is always there. The love of my family is always there. The care of my home group is always there. And I need only to open myself to that. And that's, you know, for an isolating guy like me, that's the hardest thing. But it can happen on a Zoom meeting. It can happen, my first Zoom meeting, a member of the group had learned to do Zoom just so that he could provide this meeting, and put all kinds of work into it. There were some technical glitches and it was all good. But when we got into the breakout room that I was in, the gratitude of people that there was a meeting was so overwhelming. I immediately realized it's okay. This is going to be okay. The thing, the magic, the power that I accessed in that very first meeting in Mississauga that gave me the miracle of freedom from this impossible disease, this unbeatable alcoholism, was there, and it's always there, if I'm open to it, So I hope that in some way my sharing of experience helps remind you to be open to that power if you've discovered it, and if you haven't, to be watching and waiting for it, because it will come. It will surely come.